one of the first things you have to put on is the chipper chute. It takes the 3 largest of the nuts, the 15 mil nuts that come in the package, to attach that. The rubber on here is fairly thick and fairly dense. I think it would be fine for putting in a 2-inch branch, but I've got some 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch and 1-inch branches to go through. I don't know if they're going to go through that easily or not. If I have to, I'll loosen this up. And the next thing it's going to ask you to do is put that black bracket on. Right here and right here, a couple of screws. Then the shredder scoop goes on. And you'll notice it has to attach by sliding into those grooves, and then the nuts. So those bolts don't have nuts because the nuts are actually welded onto the chute at the factory, and so all you have to do is line up the holes and screw them in. My recommendation is to use a crescent wrench because a socket set is a little difficult to get into this last one. You have a fuel tank that has a gauge. You have a tank that comes complete with this screen, as well as a red bar that indicates a fuel full line. What they don't want you to do, according to the manual, is overfill it to the point where it creates a vacuum when it's running, because that will affect engine performance. Now, I would recommend putting in fuel stabilizer in your fuel for anything like a chainsaw, snowblower, even a lawnmower, and especially a chipper, simply because you don't use them on a weekly basis. And you put gas in any kind of an engine, you store it, and you come back and you wonder why it won't run. Well, your gas has gone bad, it's gone stale. Your carburetor will varnish up, which basically plugs the jets, making it impossible to get it started without having to clear your carburetor. So the easiest thing to do is put in fuel stabilizer. It makes your gas last 6, 7, 8 months. It solves all your problems. Even with that, if you have an on-off or a fuel shut-off, that's fuel on, opening the line. There's your choke. Start the car, or start the engine. Obviously, pull start it. Once it starts, you'll notice an acceleration in the engine when you turn the choke off. That's the on-off switch right there. That's just power. That doesn't actually turn it on. You have to actually pull the cord in order to start it. And when you're done, my recommendation is not just to turn it off, but to cut fuel supply. If you cut the fuel supply, it takes an extra minute or so before it'll stop. But what will end up happening is you starve fuel to the carburetor, which will empty the carburetor, which then, when you store your engine for the next 6 months before you use the machine again, you won't have to worry about your jets being gummed up or stale fuel in your carburetor. Now, it doesn't eliminate the stale fuel in the tank, so if you're going to store it for a year or so, I would recommend emptying the tank by turning it over or using up the fuel. But for a month or 2 or 3 with a fuel stabilizer inside the tank, you're fine. But if you turn off the fuel and let it starve the carburetor, like I said, you'll have no problem starting the engine. Open your fuel line, choke, power on. Put your foot down here to keep the machine from jumping away on you. Now you are pulling not only the engine, but you have all the blades that are attached, and you're having to pull that as well. So my recommendation is not to reef on it, just give it a solid, steady pull. blades and everything to stop because there is some inertia in that. It does take an extra 10 seconds. Now I just turn the fuel line off now because I'm going to store it till tomorrow when I plan on doing the work. And then we'll see how this thing runs. I've got a few boughs here, cedar this time. They're not very thick. That's maybe 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches, the most. But it'll give you a chance to see it in action. I did take that piece of rubber off the front inlet. I wouldn't recommend it, but I will say that the previous job went a lot smoother and a lot quicker without it. And that's all I'm saying with that. Fuel on, choke on, power on. the hopper here, things tend to get stuck on the way in the sense that you have to help push them down. Again, be careful. I was using the end of a rake, and you can see she doesn't like rakes either. So watch your fingers, watch your hands, guys. Be safe.